in the dusty heart of the American frontier, where fortunes were built on the backs of cattle and dreams lay scattered across endless plains. One marriage promise would set tongues wagging across 4 territories. Hamilton Hammer McAllister. The wealthiest cattle baron this side of Dodge City had everything a man could ask for, except a wife. When he finally agreed to marry townsfolk, expected him to pick a ravishing southern belle or a glamorous heiress fresh off the stagecoach from the east. Instead, he chose Harriet Hattie Blake, a woman rumored to be as plain and unremarkable as a patch of dirt. What she did next, however, would change all their lives forever. In the summer of 1878, the fierce Kansas sun had turned the prairies near Dodge City into a brittle carpet of ochre. The dryness crackled underfoot, forming dust clouds around stagecoaches and wagons as they clattered along the rutted roads. This was cattle country, an endless expanse of rolling plains dotted with sprawling ranches, and the promise of wealth for those with the grit and vision to seize it. Hamilton Hammer McAllister was one such man. He had arrived a decade earlier with nothing but a borrowed horse and a small herd of half-starved cattle. Through raw determination, cunning negotiation, and a cold readiness to defend what was his hammer had built his ranch McAllister Range into an empire. By 1878, it boasted over 25,000 acres of prime grazing land, with thousands of longhorns stamping hoofprints into the soil. McAllister Range was no ordinary ranch. It was rumored to be protected by men as tough as coffin nails. A small cavalry of armed ranch hands, each loyal to Hammer's iron-fisted rule, watched the boundaries driving off rustlers and would-be homesteaders. The largest structures on the property were the bunkhouses and barns, but the main house, Hammer's own home, stood in the center like a fortress. Built from sturdy timber and reinforced with stone, it was a testament to his wealth and power. Yet beneath the surface of that well-oiled machine lay anxiety. Dodge City was booming, and with the newly laid tracks of the Atchison-Topeka and Santa Fe Railway bringing progress further west, land prices soared. Expansion beckoned. Hammer, never one to miss an opportunity, wanted to push beyond the boundaries of his current holdings to reach deeper into unclaimed land, ripe for grazing and speculation. But in matters of social standing, one detail repeatedly caused him shame. He was still unmarried at the age of 35. Society's whispers reached his ears. The wealthy ranchers of the region, like the Farnsworths and the Claytons, considered him little more than an unsophisticated upstart. Yes, they respected his ruthlessness and business acumen, but in parlors and dinner parties the question always echoed, if Hammer McAllister was so successful, why couldn't he find a bride? The question was not entirely fair, nor entirely correct. Women had thrown themselves at Hammer. He had been propositioned by hotel heiresses, by Eastern socialites, hungry for the thrill of the frontier, and by desperate matchmakers eager to marry off a daughter to one of the richest men in Kansas. But Hammer's heart held no eagerness for love. He believed women were more trouble than they were worth, mostly. He also believed that one day the right arrangement might serve his business interests, and if love didn't come, at least the arrangement would be mutually beneficial. That arrangement arrived unexpectedly on a scorching July afternoon inside the dark interior of a stagecoach. A dusty letter from a distant cousin carried surprising news. Harriet Hattie Blake, the daughter of a once prominent rancher from Texas, had lost her homestead to an ill-timed drought and unscrupulous bankers. Rumor said she was plain as sackcloth. Even her own father had referred to her as a fine worker, if not a fine sight to look at. But Harriet was in dire straits, living under the mercy of a distant aunt who had no sympathy for her. Hammer read the letter twice. Hattie had no prospects, no dowry, and no illusions. But she was from ranching stock, and rumor had it that she knew her way around cattle better than most men. Hammer hated to think of a fellow rancher's daughter tossed to the winds. With her father gone, Harriet was truly on her own. An odd spark of compassion flared inside him. Perhaps if he offered her a marriage of convenience, he'd gain a partner who knew the ranching life. Marrying a plain woman might have its benefits. She wouldn't be after him for frivolous reasons, and she might prove grateful, loyal, and wholly dedicated to the business. Without second-guessing, he sent word to Harriet Blake in Texas he would sponsor her trip to Dodge City. If she agreed to marry him, she would have a home and security. Unsure of what to expect, Harriet accepted. A quiet hush fell over McAllister Range when the letter confirming her arrival arrived. The ranch hands snickered about a homely bride, but Hammer enforced silence with a glare. Harriet was on her way. Heat waves shimmered on the horizon the day Harriet's stagecoach arrived. Standing outside the Dodge City station, Hammer was flanked by two of his foremen, each man wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a stern expression. Around them, travelers bustled, dust swirling. A conductor hollered instructions to a stable boy. Horses whinnied nervously. Boss That Her asked Jude, one of Hammer's foremen, nodding toward a woman descending from the stagecoach. She wore a faded grey dress, the hem stained by countless miles of road dust. Her figure was slender, and she stood at an average height, her face partially hidden beneath a bonnet. Even so, Hammer noticed her posture. Straight back, chin up, the stance of a person who refused to appear weak. That's her, Hammer said. When Harriet pushed the bonnet back from her face, Hammer regarded her carefully. Yes, her face was plain. A light dusting of freckles covered her cheeks. Her complexion was weathered by the sun, and her thin lips pressed into a firm line. She had a slightly crooked nose, as though it had once been broken and never healed properly. But her eyes, they were a striking shade of green, direct and unwavering. In that moment, Hammer realized that beneath the rumors of her plainness, Harriet possessed an arresting intensity. She hesitated before she stepped fully down, searching the small crowd for the one who had offered her salvation. Hammer advanced, towering over the other men in his impeccably tailored suit. Removing his hat, he said, "Welcome to Dodge City, Miss Blake." Harriet, clutching a modest valise, gave a quick nod. "Mr. McAllister, thank you for meeting me." Her voice was calm and controlled, but Hammer detected a quiver in her tone. Was it from fear or uncertainty? He offered his arm. Harriet looked unsure for a fleeting moment, then slipped her hand onto his forearm. Her hand was calloused, confirming she was no stranger to hard work. They exchanged few words on the way to the wagon that would take them to McAllister Range. Harriet was grateful but guarded. Hammer's foremen, Jude and Cody, followed close behind, exchanging knowing glances. Everyone in the station turned to watch. This was big news. Hammer McAllister's new bride had arrived in full daylight, not under the secrecy of night. Soon they were on the road. Dust clung to every surface as the wagon jolted over rocks. Hammer finally broke the silence. "I heard about your father," he said softly. Harriet nodded. "He was a good man, but he trusted the wrong people. I appreciate what you're doing for me." Hammer chose his next words carefully. He wasn't one to mince words, but he recognized the delicate nature of this arrangement. "Let's be clear. I don't expect romance. I'm offering you security and a role at my ranch. We marry you help with ranch operations, and in return, you'll have a home." She gave a firm nod, looking at the horizon. That's all I want, a chance to work and build something. I won't disappoint you." They rode for hours, passing long stretches of rolling prairie. Harriet took in everything: the color of the soil, the distant herds, the shape of the barns. She asked concise questions about the ranch's water sources, the stocking rates of cattle, and the location of winter feed. Hammer found himself surprised at her knowledge, and a twinge of respect sparked in him. When they finally arrived at McAllister Range, Harriet gaped at the estate. She'd heard it was big, but seeing the sprawling cattle yard, the large barns, and the main house up close was another thing entirely. "Tomorrow I'll show you around, Hammer," said, stopping the wagon in front of the main house. "Then we'll talk about the wedding." They stared at each other for a moment. Harriet offered a tentative smile that softened her features. Hammer, unaccustomed to warmth, simply gave a nod in return. Yet a flicker of something admiration perhaps passed through his mind. Hammer wasted no time. Within 3 days of Harriet's arrival, Dodge City's small chapel saw its most curious wedding in months. The few onlookers, mostly ranch workers and curious townspeople, whispered about the bride's unremarkable face and the groom's stoic expression. The preacher performed the ceremony quickly, reading from a worn Bible under dusty beams of sunlight that filtered through the chapel's simple stained glass windows. After the vows were spoken, Harriet lifted her gaze to Hammer. He offered a gentle inclination of his head. Then, with an air of awkward courtesy, he pressed a brief kiss against her cheek. That was that. They signed the registry, and Harriet became Mrs. McAllister. Outside, the newlyweds posed for a single photograph, the brilliant sun forcing Harriet to narrow her eyes. She stood stiff arms at her sides while Hammer tried to conjure a thin smile. The old photographer adjusted his lens and took the shot. It would later become the talk of the town, pinned behind the bar at the Long Branch Saloon, fueling the rumor that Harriet Blake's crooked nose hadn't even managed to change shape under marriage vows. Yet Harriet felt neither shame nor disappointment. She understood the gossip. She had accepted this marriage for survival, to have a stable life, to ensure she wouldn't starve or be forced to labor in a laundry for pennies. Besides, she sensed Hammer was a fair man underneath his gruff exterior, and that was more important to her than outward romance. That evening, Hammer hosted a modest reception at the ranch for a few close associates. Surrounded by men in dusty chaps and women wearing threadbare Sunday dresses, Harriet endured mumbled congratulations and curious gazes. She politely thanked everyone who approached, but she felt anxious. She overheard the ranch hands discussing how they had never expected Hammer to settle for a woman like that. What stung the most was that Harriet was not naive to her appearance. She knew she wasn't a classic beauty, but she had never considered herself repulsive. She could not control others' cruelty, but she could control how she handled it. That night, as she settled into her new quarters, Harriet sat at the small vanity gazing into the mirror. She traced the crooked line of her nose, remembering how it had been broken by a spiteful horse's kick when she was a child. Her reflection was unflattering in the lamplight. With a trembling sigh, she vowed that she would prove her worth. She would make Hammer McAllister's ranch flourish in a way it never had before. Early the next morning, Harriet was up before dawn. She dressed in a plain work shirt and trousers, ignoring the scandalized looks from the kitchen staff. Mrs. McAllister, the head cook, ventured, "Would you not prefer a morning gown?" Or Harriet only smiled politely. "I'm riding out to see the herds. A gown won't do me much good." She made her way to the stable's boots clacking across the wooden floor. The ranch hands were gathered there, slouching half awake. She saw Jude and Cody, Hammer's trusted foreman, looking especially curious. "Morning, Mrs. McAllister," Jude greeted. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the straw. "Boss didn't say you'd be joining us." Harriet found a sturdy roan mare and began saddling it with deft hands. The men watched, eyebrows raised. She could feel their stares. "I want to understand this ranch," she said simply. "I was raised on a ranch in Texas, so I know the basics, but every place is different. Let's go have a look, shall we?" Jude and Cody exchanged shrugs. If the new mistress wanted to ride along, who were they to argue? Harriet guided her mare with confidence. They rode out across the sprawling acreage, passing the grazing longhorns, their horns curving dangerously under the golden sky. Harriet asked question after question about water sources, about fencing, about feed costs. Occasionally she dismounted to check the quality of the grass or examine the fences for weakness. By mid-morning, Harriet had gleaned more about the ranch's day-to-day operations than some people learned in months. When they finally returned to the main house, Harriet's brow was furrowed in thought. "It's an impressive place," she told Hammer, who had emerged from his office at the sound of horses approaching. "But you're overstocking the western pasture. The grass is nearly grazed to dust. You'll face a shortage come winter if you don't rotate properly." Hammer raised his eyebrows. "Is that so, yes?" Harriet said firmly, dismounting. "Your men are focusing on corralling rustlers, but there's more than that to good ranching. We need a stricter plan for rotation, or at least a better water distribution system. I saw a few streams that are nearly dried up. Maybe we can start digging wells." The onlookers, including Jude and Cody, braced themselves for an explosion. Hammer McAllister was not known for tolerating unsolicited advice. Instead, to their surprise, he stroked his chin thoughtfully. "I've considered wells," Hammer admitted, "but the cost is steep, and steeper than losing a season's worth of cattle," Harriet countered. An awkward silence followed. Finally, a ghost of a smile tugged at Hammer's lips. "We'll talk about it inside," he said over breakfast. For the first time, Harriet felt a small wave of triumph. She had expected Hammer to dismiss her concerns. Instead, he opened the door for her and let her stride inside as an equal. She realized that she had discovered a glimmer of respect between them, and that was more precious to her than any silver wedding ring could ever be. As the weeks turned into months, Harriet immersed herself in the ranch's business. She pored over ledgers in the dusty office, balancing costs and studying the cattle markets in Kansas City, St. Louis, and Chicago. She insisted on accompanying Hammer to meetings with suppliers, bankers, and neighboring ranchers. Her presence often drew stares and snickers, but Harriet pushed through the discomfort, winning quiet admiration with her relentless focus and practical suggestions. One day, while Harriet and Hammer sat hunched over the ranch's accounting books, a rider came galloping into the yard. Dust curled around his horse's hooves as he dismounted, rushing in with urgent news for Hammer. Rustlers had hit the southwestern edge of McAllister Range, making off with over 24 head of prime cattle. They were seen heading for the Cimarron River, the messenger panted. "We think they might cross into Indian territory." Hammer rose at once, grabbing his hat and gun belt. He turned to Harriet, expecting her to remain behind, but Harriet was already on her feet, eyes flaring with purpose. "I'm coming," she said, buckling on a holster that belonged to her father. She had arrived with it, though rarely worn. Hammer hesitated. "This is no place for a lady. They're armed thieves, Harriet." She did not flinch. "I'm not helpless." Hammer gave a half nod. "Suit yourself." They assembled a posse of ranch hands, including Jude and Cody, then rode out to find the rustlers. Harriet's heart hammered in her chest, not out of fear but adrenaline. She had faced ranch raids before in Texas, but never on this scale. The stolen cattle meant a significant financial blow to McAllister Range, and Harriet felt personally invested. She wanted to see the ranch prosper, and yes, perhaps she wanted to prove her worth in Hammer's eyes. Following the tracks across the rolling hills, they reached the Cimarron River by sundown. In the fading light, they caught sight of a small makeshift corral, hidden by thick cottonwood trees. Lanterns glowed, revealing silhouettes of men moving among stolen cattle. Hammer dismounted, signaling to the others to spread out. Harriet found a vantage point behind an outcropping of rock, her pistol drawn, but her nerves tensed. She watched as Hammer and the men crept closer, ready to confront the rustlers. The thieves, however, were no fools. Perhaps they had a lookout posted, or perhaps they saw shadows move in the dying light. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes painting the night with bursts of orange. The air ripped with the sound of bullets whizzing in all directions. In the chaos, Harriet kept her head low, scanning for an opportunity. She spotted a rustler, aiming his rifle at Hammer's exposed flank. Without thinking, Harriet rose to one knee, took steady aim, and fired. The rustler dropped with a cry shot in the shoulder. Harriet's heart pounded. She had saved Hammer from a bullet that might have been lethal. Soon the rustlers realized they were outgunned and fled, leaving behind the stolen cattle. Darkness enveloped the scene, broken by flickering lantern light. Hammer and his men regrouped, rounding up the frightened cattle. Harriet stayed back until she was sure the danger had passed. When Hammer finally approached, her lantern in hand, Harriet saw the astonishment in his eyes. "You saved my life," he said bluntly. She brushed it off with a shrug, though her hands trembled from the adrenaline. "You would have done the same for me. And besides, that rustler had it coming." Hammer regarded her silently, as if seeing her for the first time. "Thank you," he said, his voice tight. "I owe you." Harriet tucked her pistol away. "It's my ranch, too. We protect what's ours." They held each other's gaze, the weight of unspoken understanding passing between them. Something changed that night. For all the talk of Harriet being plain or homely, she had revealed an inner fortitude that no beauty pageant could match. Hammer had built his empire on strength and cunning. Now he discovered those qualities in the woman by his side. News of Harriet's bravery spread through Dodge City faster than a prairie fire. Folks who had once scoffed at Hammer's new wife, mocking her appearance, questioning her worth, found themselves whispering a different tune. She had stepped into gunfire to save her husband. Many men admired that. The ranch hands softened their attitudes, giving Harriet respectful nods in the yard. Some even began asking her advice on ranch matters. Yet Harriet sensed friction beneath the newfound respect. She heard rumors that a rival cattle baron, George Farnsworth, was planning an aggressive expansion. Farnsworth had deep pockets and political connections. Harriet also learned through the local banker that Farnsworth wanted to broker a deal with Hammer, either to buy a portion of McAllister Range or to merge their herds. Harriet suspected Farnsworth's motives were far from benevolent. He likely wanted a monopoly in the region. One morning, Harriet found Hammer pacing in his office. Letters lay scattered across his desk. Farnsworth's offered a staggering sum. Hammer admitted to buy the southwestern segment. "It's the same land you said we'd overstocked." He claims it's worthless. "So why pay so much for it?" Harriet frowned, scanning the letter. "He knows something we don't. Perhaps he plans to dig wells, or maybe the railroad will extend in that direction. Selling might be a short-term fix, but we'd lose future leverage. I suspect Farnsworth of aiming to control the route to the Chisholm Trail." Hammer nodded, eyes shadowed by worry. "He's cunning. I'd hate to see us lose ground. But Farnsworth can lean on the local politicians. He might use eminent domain if he cozies up to the railroad." Harriet paused. We could expand elsewhere first. Secure water rights build up the ranch's resilience. When Farnsworth sees we won't back down, he might reconsider. Right now, he views you as vulnerable. Hammer gazed at her. What do you propose? She shrugged, her practicality shining. We invest in better wells and fencing. Negotiate with smaller ranchers who are struggling. Bring them under your umbrella. Make them an offer to supply their stock under fair terms. We strengthen alliances and present a united front against Farnsworth. People will side with us if we're fair, especially if Farnsworth has cheated them in the past. Hammer's eyes lit up with a mixture of admiration and skepticism. That'll cost a fortune. Harriet set her jaw. Short-term losses for long-term gains. Farnsworth can't bully a ranch that's too influential to be bullied. A slow grin curved Hammer's lips. You sound more like a cattle baron than I do. Harriet felt a flutter in her chest. Was that a compliment? She returned the smile. Some might say that's exactly what I am. They spent the rest of the morning mapping out a plan of expansion, scribbling notes and figures, discussing potential alliances. Hammer offered Harriet a seat at his desk side by side with him, a symbolic shift from their earlier arrangement where she would stand. Each time their eyes met, Harriet felt a spark she could neither name nor deny. Word reached Farnsworth of the McAllisters' move to build alliances. True to Harriet's suspicions, Farnsworth invited Hammer to a formal dinner in Dodge City's finest establishment, the Dodge House Hotel. Harriet insisted on coming along, determined to observe Farnsworth's maneuvers. Farnsworth's reputation as a polished gentleman with a wolf's cunning preceded him. That evening, Harriet wore her best dress, a simple yet neat burgundy gown that flattered her figure just enough. She still felt painfully aware of her imperfect features, but she held her head high. Entering the Dodge House Hotel's ornate dining room, Harriet saw Farnsworth across the room, chatting with local dignitaries. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair, a well-groomed beard, and the confident aura of someone who always got his way. McAllister Farnsworth boomed when Hammer approached. "Glad you could make it, and this must be your new bride." He turned to Harriet with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Harriet, is it I've heard so much about you? Quite the marksman, they say." Harriet noticed the subtle condescension in his tone, but maintained her composure. "One does what one must on the frontier," she replied evenly. Farnsworth escorted them to a private table where glasses of brandy and plates of fine roast awaited. Other powerful ranchers and town officials joined them, discussing everything from the upcoming county elections to the possibility of a new railway extension. Hammer kept a close eye on Farnsworth, who steered the conversation toward land deals. Now Hammer Farnsworth said, swirling his brandy, "I hear you've been poking around, forming alliances with some of the smaller ranchers. Clever, I must say. But don't spread yourself too thin. The southwestern portion of your ranch, arid, overgrazed. Let me take it off your hands at a fair price. You concentrate on the rest." Harriet spoke up before Hammer could respond. "That land is still viable. A few improvements, and it'll turn a profit. We're not interested in selling." Farnsworth's gaze turned icy, though his lips remained curved in a polite smile. "Ah, the new Mrs. McAllister is also an expert on land use." My, you've done well, Hammer." "Indeed I have," Hammer replied, leaning back. "We appreciate the offer, Farnsworth, but we'll pass." Silence clung to the table. Some men frowned, sensing tension. Farnsworth pretended to laugh it off. "Well, if you ever change your mind, my door is open. I'd hate to see that land fall to dust." Hammer and Harriet said little for the remainder of the dinner. Harriet noticed Farnsworth exchanging pointed looks with a few local officials. What deals was he brokering behind their backs? When the evening ended, Hammer offered Harriet his arm. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, Harriet whispered, "He's planning something, isn't he?" Hammer nodded. "Count on it." As the rivalry with Farnsworth simmered, Harriet found an unwelcome complication within McAllister Range. One of the senior ranch hands, a man named Russell, seemed to harbor resentment toward her. At first it was subtle. He'd failed to carry out her instructions or offer snide remarks under his breath. But as Harriet's influence grew, so did Russell's hostility. One afternoon, Harriet and Jude were reviewing herd counts when Russell stomped over reeking of whiskey. "I've been here 15 years, he muttered. "I ain't taken orders from no new bride who thinks she knows better." Harriet straightened, meeting his glare. "Anyone who works this ranch takes orders from me and from Hammer. If you can't respect that, maybe it's time you moved on." Russell spat at the ground near Harriet's feet. "We'll see about that." He stormed away, leaving Harriet rattled but determined. Jude shifted uncomfortably. He's been loyal to the boss for a long time, but he's always had a mean streak. Harriet nodded already, filing away the exchange in her mind. She suspected Farnsworth might try to infiltrate Hammer's operation by turning disgruntled employees. She resolved to keep a close eye on Russell. That night, she discussed it with Hammer over a late supper. "Russell's a ticking bomb. If Farnsworth offers him money, we could find ourselves sabotaged." Hammer grimaced. "He was loyal once, but maybe he feels threatened. I'll talk to him, or I'll fire him if he doesn't straighten up. We can't risk a traitor." Despite Hammer's attempts to smooth things over, Russell remained sullen and insubordinate. Harriet suspected he nursed a deep grudge, one that might soon explode at the worst possible time. As McAllister Range pressed forward, with expansion plans, digging the first well, forging new contracts with smaller ranchers, Farnsworth made his next move. One evening, while Harriet took inventory in the supply shed, a shadow fell across the doorway. She turned startled to see Farnsworth himself, standing there elegantly dressed, wearing a polite but predatory smile. "Mrs. McAllister," he began in a honeyed tone, "my apologies for intruding. Your ranch hand let me in." Harriet's heart hammered. She stepped outside, blinking under the afternoon sun. "You have a habit of showing up uninvited, Mr. Farnsworth." He chuckled. "A man in my position must be resourceful. I came to see Hammer, but perhaps it's you I should speak to. You're the real brains, aren't you?" "I work with my husband, not behind his back," Harriet said icily. "What do you want?" Farnsworth sighed with feigned regret. "I fear Hammer is making unwise business decisions. He's expanding into precarious territory. At the same time, you two have garnered goodwill among the smaller ranchers. So I'll make this simple. Let me buy that southwestern land. I'll pay a premium even more than I previously offered. Think of the security that would bring you financial freedom. No need to struggle with uncertain wells and dry seasons. Let me help you." Harriet stifled a scoff. "You're not interested in helping us. You're interested in cornering the market." He waved a hand dismissively. "Does that matter?" "It's simply business. You're a pragmatic woman. You must realize a guaranteed profit is better than a risky gamble. Moreover, if you stand in my way, I could make life difficult. Politically, legally, even physically." Harriet's blood ran cold. "Are you threatening us?" He gave a chilling smile. "Merely cautioning. The West is a harsh place. One misstep can be costly. If anything should happen to your husband, you'd be vulnerable." Harriet's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, if anything should happen?" Farnsworth made a small bow. "Just something to consider. Good day, Mrs. McAllister." He turned and strolled away, leaving Harriet trembling with anger and a tinge of dread. She hurried to find Hammer. When she relayed Farnsworth's words, Hammer's fury was palpable. "He dares to threaten us on our own land," Hammer growled, pacing the office. "We'll accelerate the well digging, rally the smaller ranchers. We must not bow to him." Yet Harriet's mind lingered on Farnsworth's ominous remark, "If anything should happen to your husband." She glanced at the window, half expecting to see Farnsworth or one of his agents lurking. She felt a surge of resolve. Whatever Farnsworth had planned, she would not let him destroy what she and Hammer had built together. She would stand by her husband, even if it meant confronting Farnsworth's threat face to face. Harriet redoubled her efforts, forging stronger ties with neighboring ranchers. She visited their spreads, discussing shared grazing strategies, offering favorable terms for joint cattle drives. Some ranchers, initially hesitant, admired Harriet's level-headed approach and willingness to share resources. In exchange, Harriet asked for their pledge to stand against Farnsworth's growing dominance. Hammer, meanwhile, negotiated a significant loan from the First National Bank of Dodge City to fund the well projects. A sense of urgency pervaded McAllister Range. Everyone worked late into the evenings, clearing rock-reinforcing fences, trying to fortify the southwestern pasture. If Farnsworth wanted that land, Hammer would show him it was worth defending. During this hectic time, Harriet became increasingly aware of subtle sabotage. Equipment disappeared. Fences were cut in the night. Newly dug well shafts collapsed mysteriously. Each act cost time and money. Though no one had proof, Harriet suspected Farnsworth was behind it, or possibly Russell, whose surly disposition had worsened, leading Harriet to wonder if he was Farnsworth's pawn. One evening, Harriet cornered Russell in the barn. "You know anything about the fence cutting last night?" she demanded, her voice tight with suspicion. Russell glowered at her, arms crossed. "You think I'm a sneak? I don't know nothing." She studied his face, searching for clues. "Just remember," she warned, "if you cross this ranch, Hammer won't take it lightly. Neither will I." Russell spat on the ground. "Who's to say Farnsworth can't give me a better deal than the pittance Hammer pays?" Harriet stiffened. "So you admit Farnsworth is making offers?" He sneered. "I ain't admitting nothing. But a man's gotta eat, especially after you came in, pretending to be the boss." With that, he stormed away, leaving Harriet with clenched fists. She immediately reported the exchange to Hammer, who ordered Russell fired. "I'll deal with him," Hammer growled. "We can't risk a traitor. I'll pay him what he's owed and send him on his way." But the next morning, Russell was gone, vanished without collecting his pay, leaving behind a half-packed bunk. Harriet and Hammer exchanged a foreboding glance. Russell knew the layout of McAllister Range, inside and out. If he had gone to Farnsworth, he could feed him vital information. As if on cue, Farnsworth sent Hammer an invitation to meet at a neutral location, an abandoned ranch outside of Dodge City. The note was terse. "Come alone if you want to avoid unnecessary trouble." Harriet argued passionately against Hammer going alone. "It's obviously a trap," she said. "He's probably employed Russell as well. You'll be outnumbered." Hammer set his jaw. "If I don't go, Farnsworth escalates. Maybe I can buy time or glean information." Harriet refused to let him face Farnsworth alone. "I'm coming," she insisted. "I'll hide nearby, armed in case things go south." Hammer hesitated, then relented. "All right, but keep your head down." They rode out at dawn, traveling a winding path to avoid being followed. They left the horses tethered out of sight a half-mile away, then crept through the scrub until they reached the broken-down ranch. Harriet concealed herself behind a collapsed stable, her pistol in hand. From there, she had a clear view of the dusty courtyard, where Farnsworth stood, with a handful of men, including the newly aligned Russell. Hammer approached with confidence, though Harriet could see the tension in his posture. Farnsworth wasted no time. "We've played this game long enough, Hammer. The Southwestern Land, or war. Your choice." Hammer crossed his arms, glaring at Russell. "So you hired my former ranch hand? I expected as much." Farnsworth smirked. "A wise investment. He's offered me useful details about your expansions, your defenses, even your brand new wells. You're hemorrhaging money, aren't you?" Hammer said nothing, though Harriet knew Farnsworth's words weren't entirely untrue. Funding the expansions had put McAllister Range in debt to the bank. Farnsworth sighed dramatically. "I'm trying to be civil here. The Southwestern Land is worth more to me than it is to you. I'll pay handsomely. Sign it over or I'll bury you in lawsuits, sabotage your shipments, and turn every politician in this county against you. By the time I'm done, you'll be forced to sell the entire ranch at half its value if you're not ruined completely." A flicker of doubt crossed Hammer's face, but he held firm. "You forget one thing, the people in this region. They stand by me. We can hold out." Farnsworth's eyes gleamed with malice. "Don't be naive, Hammer. I hold the purse strings. Even your allies will buckle when I cut off their supply lines or bribe them to deliver their herds elsewhere. I'm giving you a final chance. Sell willingly, or face financial and physical ruin." A tense silence ensued, broken only by the whistle of the prairie wind. Harriet's heart pounded. She reached for the rifle strapped to her back, ready for the worst. Then Farnsworth made a subtle gesture, and Russell stepped forward with a revolver drawn, aiming at Hammer. "I got no beef with you, boss," Russell sneered. "But Farnsworth pays double what you offered. The day Harriet arrived, you started caring more about her ideas than your loyal men. This is how it ends." Hammer's hand hovered near his holster. "You're making a mistake, Russell." Farnsworth raised an eyebrow. "Last chance, Hammer. Sell or die." Harriet's finger tightened on the rifle's trigger. She watched Hammer's posture shift. He was calculating. If Hammer reached for his gun, Farnsworth's men would likely shoot first. Unable to bear it, Harriet acted. She rose from cover rifle, aimed at Russell. "Drop it!" she shouted. Russell spun, startled. Farnsworth's men, scattered hands going to their guns. Hammer seized the distraction, drawing his pistol in a flash. The tense standoff teetered on a razor's edge. Harriet's mind raced. If Farnsworth gave the order, gunfire would erupt and Hammer would be outnumbered. But Farnsworth's cunning eyes flicked between Harriet and Hammer. He saw Harriet's unwavering rifle pointed straight at Russell's chest and Hammer's revolver aimed at Farnsworth himself. Sensing the precarious situation, Farnsworth raised a hand to signal for calm. "Impressive, Mrs. McAllister," Farnsworth said with a slow clap. "You're both quite the team, but this is far from over. Your expansions are draining your coffers, and my alliances grow by the day. You can't keep watch over your vast ranch forever. Sooner or later you'll slip up." A deadly silence hung in the air. Russell looked ready to shoot Harriet out of pure spite, but Farnsworth motioned him to stand down. "Come," Farnsworth ordered his men. "We'll let them stew in their defiance a bit longer." With a sneer, Russell holstered his weapon, turning to follow Farnsworth away. Harriet kept her rifle raised until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did she exhale shakily, lowering the barrel. Hammer turned to her, breath ragged. "You risked your life again," he said quietly. "So did you," Harriet replied, her voice trembling. "And I won't let Farnsworth kill you just to steal our land." Hammer caught her hand, squeezing it. "We need a new plan, and we need it now." Back at McAllister Range, Harriet and Hammer gathered Jude Cody and the trusted ranch hands to strategize. The threat of Farnsworth loomed large. Harriet proposed forging an agreement with the railroad itself if they could secure a future line or station on McAllister Range. Farnsworth would lose his leverage. But the railroad lobby was notoriously corrupt. They'd demand a high price, and Farnsworth might already have them in his pocket. In a stroke of luck, Harriet received a discreet message from Alice Farnsworth, George Farnsworth's estranged daughter. She requested a secret meeting at the Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City. Harriet was puzzled. She didn't even know Farnsworth had a daughter, let alone one who might help them. At dusk, Harriet slipped away to the saloon. Men in cowboy hats crowded around card tables, thick smoke curling in the air. Harriet found a booth near the back, where a young woman in a modest dress waited nervously. "You're Harriet McAllister?" the woman asked softly. Harriet nodded. "Alice Farnsworth." She dipped her head in confirmation, then looked around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "I overheard my father's plans. He aims to ruin you and your husband, no matter the cost. I can't stomach it. I don't want his money or his cruelty anymore." Harriet studied Alice, noting the earnest expression on her pale face. "What do you want from me?" A flicker of shame and desperation crossed Alice's features. "I want out. I want to leave Dodge City, start fresh somewhere else. But I need money, and I need to ensure my father won't track me down. If I give you information that can help you stop him, will you help me disappear?" Harriet was astonished. "You're his daughter. How can you betray him like this?" Alice bit her lip. "You've heard of the Farnsworth Ranch in Colorado. My father forced my mother to leave when she became ill, and she died alone, penniless, while he pretended nothing was amiss. Now he wants me to marry some railroad tycoon to expand his empire. I won't be used. I want my freedom." Touched by the woman's plight, Harriet nodded. "If your information is good, we can help you. Hammer has connections in Texas. We can give you money and a safe escort out of Kansas." Relief washed over Alice's face. "Thank you. My father has been bribing county commissioners to pass legislation that will claim your southwestern land under the guise of building public roads. He'll then buy it at a discount or force you to sign it over. The final vote is in 2 weeks. You need to sway those commissioners or reveal Farnsworth's corruption. If you can't, the law will be on his side." Harriet clenched her fists. "How can we prove his corruption?" Alice opened her reticule, removing a small notebook. "I've been recording his bribes amounts, dates, who accepted them. If you show this to the right people, Farnsworth could be finished." Harriet's breath caught. "That's the evidence we need. But be careful," Alice warned. "If my father learns I gave you this, he'll kill us both." Harriet returned to McAllister Range, with Alice's notebook tucked safely under her coat. She shared the news with Hammer and their trusted inner circle. The next morning, they hurried to contact the one authority figure who might help Marshal Buckley, a tough but fair lawman known for his integrity. They met Marshal Buckley in a back room of the Dodge City Sheriff's Office. Harriet handed him the notebook. The marshal's brows rose as he scanned the incriminating entries. "If this is authentic," he murmured, Farnsworth has half the county in his pocket. Hammer nodded. We need your help, Marshal. He plans to use the commissioner's vote to seize our land. But if we can expose him— Marshal Buckley snapped the notebook shut. Corruption runs deep, but I can bring this to the governor's attention if I have sworn affidavits. That means I'll need testimony from at least one of the commissioners Farnsworth bribed someone who regrets his involvement. Harriet sighed. Getting a crooked commissioner to confess won't be easy. No, it won't, the marshal agreed. But if you can find one who's had second thoughts, maybe. In the meantime, I'll keep this notebook under lock and key. Farnsworth can't know we have it. They left the office with a renewed sense of purpose. Harriet wasted no time. She scoured her network discreetly, probing for any commissioner who might resent Farnsworth's stranglehold. Eventually she found a lead Commissioner Allen, a cautious man who had always cast uncertain glances at Farnsworth's gatherings. Under the guise of a random visit, Harriet managed to corner Commissioner Allen in a quiet corner of the local cafe. We need to talk about George Farnsworth, she began. Allen turned pale, nearly spilling his coffee. I can't be seen with you, Mrs. McAllister. Harriet placed a steadying hand on his wrist. You don't agree with Farnsworth's plans. I can see it in your eyes. You have a chance to do something right. Allen swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. He threatened my family. If I vote against him, my children could be harmed. Harriet lowered her voice. We have proof of his corruption. If you testify, the marshal can arrest him. You'll be safe under protection. Allen's expression crumpled. I can't. He has men everywhere. Seeing his fear, Harriet made a bold offer. We'll bring you and your family to McAllister Range under guard. We'll send you wherever you want afterward. But we need your testimony. Help me, Commissioner. You must do the right thing. At length, Allen nodded, eyes brimming with guilt and relief. I'll do it. Heaven help us. Over the next week, Harriet and Hammer quietly gathered supporters. They prepared sworn statements, lined up a safe route for Commissioner Allen's family, and made sure the marshal had everything he needed. Meanwhile, Farnsworth intensified his pressure. Rumors surfaced that Farnsworth was employing hired guns to stir trouble if the commissioner's vote didn't go his way. The day of the vote dawned hot and cloudless. Crowds formed outside the Dodge City Courthouse, tensions high. Harriet stood by Commissioner Allen as he prepared to deliver the testimony that would rock Farnsworth's empire. Hammer was nearby with a cadre of loyal ranch hands and armed men prepared to defend Allen if Farnsworth's henchmen tried anything. Inside the courthouse, the air was stifling. Farnsworth took a seat at the front, flanked by smug-looking commissioners he had certainly bribed. When Commissioner Allen rose to speak, Farnsworth's expression hardened. In clear, halting words, Allen confessed to accepting bribes from Farnsworth and colluding to push legislation that targeted McAllister Range. The audience erupted into gasps. Farnsworth stood, his face purpling with rage. Marshal Buckley, seated in the back, stepped forward. He brandished the notebook Harriet had provided. Commissioner Allen's statement corroborates these records. George Farnsworth, consider yourself under investigation for corruption, extortion, and conspiracy. A stunned silence followed. Then Farnsworth snarled, reaching inside his coat. Harriet's eyes widened. She saw the glint of a revolver as Farnsworth drew it, pointing it at Allen. Chaos erupted. Court officials dove for cover. The crowd scattered, screams echoing off the wooden walls. Harriet, who had been near the side of the room, reacted instantly. She reached for her pistol, but Farnsworth already had Allen in his sights. His finger tightened on the trigger only for Harriet to lunge forward and tackle Farnsworth's arm. The shot went wide, burying itself in the wall. Farnsworth swung wildly at Harriet, with his other hand knocking her to the ground. She gritted her teeth against the pain, refusing to let him take aim again. Gunshots rang out from Farnsworth's hired guns, but Hammer and the ranch hands were quicker. Jude tackled one gunman to the floor. Cody disarmed another. Marshal Buckley fired a warning shot into the ceiling, shouting, "Drop your weapons!" In the melee, Farnsworth wrestled free of Harriet's grip. He tried to raise his revolver again. Harriet scrambled up, and with a burst of determination knocked Farnsworth's gun from his hand. It clattered across the wooden floor. Farnsworth spun on her face, twisted in fury. "You ruined me," he hissed. Harriet stared him down. "No, you did that yourself." Before Farnsworth could lash out again, Hammer and Marshal Buckley grabbed him, forcing him face first against a table. Handcuffs clicked around Farnsworth's wrists. Outside, Farnsworth's men either fled or were subdued by the ranch hands. It was over. Panting Harriet felt the adrenaline drain. She saw Hammer staring at her concern in his eyes. "You all right?" he asked gently, touching a bruised spot on her shoulder. She nodded, too breathless to speak, but feeling a surge of triumph. Together they had stood against corruption and won. With Farnsworth arrested, his empire crumbled. His assets were seized during the lengthy investigation. His political clout evaporated overnight. Commissioner Allen and the Marshal were hailed as heroes for exposing the scandal. Though Allen admitted privately, he only found the courage because Harriet had insisted. Meanwhile, McAllister Range flourished. Freed from Farnsworth's intimidation, Harriet and Hammer forged stable partnerships with neighboring ranchers. The southwestern pasture, once Farnsworth's target, soon became a site for advanced irrigation wells, turning what had been borderline land into a profitable grazing area. The ranch's finances recovered, bolstered by increased cattle drives to the railheads. Yet for Harriet, one challenge remained throughout everything. The marriage of convenience, the public ridicule, the shootouts, the sabotage. She had proven her value in countless ways, but she felt uncertain about Hammer's true feelings. Did he see her only as a business partner, or had their shared trials ignited something deeper? One crisp autumn morning, Harriet rose early and rode out to the southwestern land. The well project had just finished, and the water gushed freely, transforming the parched soil. She stared at the fields of green, a testament to her planning, and Hammer's willingness to trust her vision. A warm sense of accomplishment washed over her. Moments later, Hammer appeared on horseback. He dismounted, walking over to stand beside her by the new well. They gazed at the horizon, the rising sun painting the prairie in gold. "You did this," Hammer said quietly, his voice carrying uncharacteristic softness. "You took a piece of land everyone said was worthless and turned it into something that can feed us all year. You saved me from the rustler's bullet. You saved our ranch from Farnsworth's clutches. I owe you more than I can ever repay." Harriet chuckled. "You've already given me a home and your trust." "That's enough." Hammer's expression turned solemn. "I haven't given you what you deserve, Harriet. You've sacrificed, faced danger. You showed more courage than any person I've known. I realize I've never properly thanked you or expressed how I feel." Her heart fluttered. She waited unsure. He took her hand. "I married you for convenience, but that arrangement has changed for me. I never knew I could feel this way. I see you, Harriet, your grit, your intelligence, your compassion, and there's nothing plain about you." He paused, swallowing. "I want you to know I love you." She gaped, stunned, her vision blurred with tears. She had never expected such words from the stoic Hammer McAllister. "Hammer, I never expected this." He gripped her hand tighter. "I'm not good with words. You probably noticed that. But you're everything I never knew I needed. If you'll have me not just as a husband on paper, but as a true partner in life, I'd be honored." Tears escaped Harriet's eyes, and she laughed through them. "Of course I will. I love you too." His eyes widened with wonder, as though he'd never dared hope. Gently, he cupped her cheek, tilting her face to his. In the quiet of the prairie morning, they shared a real heartfelt kiss for the very first time. It was not a transaction or a matter of social expectation. It was genuine, shaped by trials, forged in adversity, sealed by mutual respect and admiration. From that day on, Harriet's transformation from the ugly woman to the respected, beloved mistress of McAllister Range was complete in the eyes of Dodge City and beyond. Folks who once sniggered at her appearance now admired her strength and intelligence, and every time Hammer looked at her, he saw not a single flaw. He saw the partner who had saved his life and changed it for the better in ways he never could have imagined. They wrote the final chapter of their story upon the sweeping plains side by side, forging a life stronger than any dusty rumor or backhanded deal. Harriet Blake McAllister had proven that it wasn't a perfectly shaped face or elegant manner that won respect. It was bravery, vision, and an unbreakable spirit. And Hammer McAllister, once a solitary figure atop the largest ranch in Kansas, found a deeper fortune than cattle or land. He found true companionship and love. If you enjoyed this tale of grit, heart, and frontier justice, show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with fellow Wild West fans, and subscribing to our channel. Join us for more legendary stories of the untamed plains, where ordinary people must rise to extraordinary challenges, and where a single act of courage can shape destinies forever. Saddle up, subscribe, and let's ride the trail of adventure together.